So the times that we live in, these times are full of Jew hatred. We find ourselves, actually, part of our problem is a great part of it, is that many of us have been taken over by the other side too. When I read my local newspaper, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis has had a Jewish community since the 1840s, but it's also one of the landmark capitals of Reform Judaism. When you see the bounty that is being gathered in with all the intermarriages, with the fact that the president of the Federation, briefly elected, appears in a photo with his husband. This is the values of reform. It's the concept of everybody free to be who they want to be. No Torah, just leftist ideas. This is our Jewish people today, but we are still the Jewish people, and inside of us we know what we need to do. Now, many of these things are founded on the idea, mistaken, of humanistic ideas. So that's your left. But unfortunately, their tactics and who they really are people who hate the essentials of Torah and Judaism. Now, here we are on the call of Mount Sinai. Now, this means a lot to me because it's something inside, because I'm a fourth-generation American, and I was born in 1945, the day after Hitler shot himself. The world that I was born into, or my cousins, my older cousins, all went to the war. I just had no idea what was going on there, but the war was over. And now we find ourselves in different circumstances. And you're outside, so, as I say, so I am so connected to the community of St. Louis, which is really in tremendous error right now. Of how we get those people back, I do not know, but this is the answer. The call of Mount Sinai. 3,000 years ago, the psalmist King David prophesied about how the world would chafe at the ethical responsibilities of Jewish values. This here you go like this. They don't like what we like. Why do the people gather and the nations talk in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the lords conspire secretly against God and his anointed, that is the Jews, saying, "Let us cut their cords of the moral burden and cast off their ropes." This is why the Talmud states in a play on words that the Mount Sinai, this word SINAI, which I've said before in other shiurim, the Hebrew word for hatred, came into the world at Mount Sinai. Up until that time, I guess there was plenty of hatred, but not focused like this. While Jew hate certainly predated Sinai, it now had a powerful new motivator aimed at the Jews. It was there, the dawn of a new era in human history, when the 10 Commandments, the moral commandments, and the Torah were given. That anti-Semitism, this is where the focus took on its profound significance. Let me bring this down just a little bit here. Hitler said it directly, as quoted by Rauschning, the 10 Commandments have lost their validity. Perhaps not all Germans were aware of the depth of Nazi ideology, even if they supported Hitler and disliked Jews. However, the German nation was educated in these lessons as illustrated by the Nazi youth song "Jews Out, Away with the Pope." This is a nice little Nazi youth song. "No, we have not bled, anonymous and without fame. So the German race will be Judaized through Christendom again. We are free from the mountain of Sinai. The sun circulates, you leave us alone." Dostoevsky's Inquisitor's harsh harsh message that Jesus is the same one that anti-Semites have been asking the Jews over the centuries. Why have you come to get in our way? Jew hatred is the instinct to get Jews and everything they represent out of the way. This stark similarities and contrasts between Nazi ideology and Jewish values highlights the enduring struggle between brute force and moral responsibility. I'm thinking right now about what they're saying about Gaza. It's the holy Gazan people up against this harsh, vicious Jewish people who try to gobble them up and enforce their will upon them. Both philosophies agreed that this is the human story. Summing up human history based on the Nazi and Jewish worldviews then, beginning with Abraham, a spiritual revolution emerged that introduced a new outlook into the world. Now, when you read the Bible, which everybody should, get those Sansino and Sanchino, one, how you pronounce it, but get something authentically made by rabbis. Beginning with Abraham as spiritual revelation. That's what he said, the revolution take. But this revolution, and we're going to here skip through this page, successful, that it was so successful that 3,700 years later, one of the most powerful nations of the world, which was Germany, launched a campaign of genocide to eradicate it. That's Judaism, 3,700 years old. Hitler observed with fear and disgust that most of the modern world had embraced the ideas brought to the world by Abraham in the revelation at Sinai. These Jewish teachings promote values that are now widely accepted. Classic Western liberalization, rejecting the primitive ideals of might makes right, and instead striving for equal and human rights and the dignity and sanctity of life. They advocate for caring for the oppressed and downtrodden, promoting universal education, creating social welfare programs to help the sick and needy, encouraging tolerance, working to end racism, and fostering peace, and the end to violence and war. These ideals, which are fundamental to Judaism, were not widely accepted when they were first introduced. Now remember that Jesus the Jew, is the introduction of Jewish ideas into the Roman world. That's our brother. That's the second partner in the womb. It's no coincidence that one of the freest countries in human history has a verse from the Hebrew Bible inscribed on the Liberty Bell. What does it say? Proclaim liberty throughout all the land until all the inhabitants thereof. It is also no coincidence that the global institution tasked with working for world peace, which is the United Nations, takes its visions from Jewish prophet Isaiah. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. But over the thousands of years that it took humanity to get to where it became self-evident that all men are created equal, wow, there's a long distance. There has been resistance every step of the way. Now, in this country, we have a very strong leftist movement, and many Jewish people are caught up into it. And Jews have always been involved in leftist movements, which are revolutionary in their sense that they want to replace the current order with a new one. There are things to be said that are good in those ideas, but their direction is anti-Semitic, and we see how it so easily that it combines itself with jihadism. There is a body-soul push and pull throughout history, as the lofty and the holy ideas are slowly and painfully integrated into civilization, they are simultaneously resisted. The pushback, that pushback is called anti-Semitism. Now, this is really, I think, a very important book, the book for our time. Now, this man that came out, he's not well known, even though he's produced a tremendous amount. But look at the idea that he has here. The Sinaitic 10 commandments suddenly are in humanity. It means you can't do whatever you want. Now, we have a strong thing like that. This is a leftist idea. In a commercial society, I'm going to make this statement, the Torah is very against homosexuality. That is male homosexuality. Men having sex with men. It's a very easy thing to do and to get into, but it is counterproductive. And in the society that we live in now, homosexuality, the Rainbow Coalition, which you could see in one sense of why it would be, it'd be nice to include them. We live in a commercial society. Nobody should be discriminated against. That's part of our creed. But on the other hand, this behavior, and then also pornography, this behavior also exceeds to cruelty, anti-family. And that is the Anti-Family Coalition, which is currently going on in the United States. In his novel, The Portage of San Cristobal, the literary critic and philosopher George Steiner imagines a scenario where Adolf Hitler survived World War II and hides in Argentina. Jewish Nazi hunters eventually capture him. Unable to extradite Hitler to Israel, they organize an improvised trial on the spot, give the evil one a chance to justify his actions and explain why he committed genocide. Hitler offers a fascinating defense. You call me a tyrant and enslaver. What tyranny, what enslavement has been more oppressive, has branded the skin and the soul of man more deeply than the sick fantasies of the Jew? You are not God killers, but God makers. You created God. You're Hollywood. And that is infinitely worse. The Jew invented consciousness that left man a guilty serf. The medieval scholar Rashi, reflecting on the Torah's careful choice of words in the war of the Jews against the people of Midian, going way back now, 3,500 years, explains that those who fight the Jewish people are simultaneously fighting God. It's not going well in Iran right now. This helps us understand the Torah's prediction given to Abraham: those who bless you will be blessed, and he who curses you will be cursed. All the nations will be blessed through you. It's much more than a metaphysical promise. It's a description of the natural consequences of society's values. Those societies open to and appreciative of Jewish values. Now we see that many Christians are coming to our aid. My wife and I were on a bike trip about 10 years ago, running from New Orleans to Florida. We're standing in front of a giant billboard with the Star of Israel, the Magen David, white, and the flag of Israel, just sitting out here in the middle of, God's country. We have a lot of people behind us. But on the other hand, those societies open to and appreciative of Jewish values will be blessed by modeling these values, thereby becoming free, open, and tolerant societies. That's what our society is supposed to be. Those close to these ideas are usually repressive and undemocratic societies. Think Barack Obama and the group. We understand what they are fighting for, but on the other hand, and to the extent they are repressive regimes, they don't really like Jews around. They will not like Jews in Israel. even though, and it's been pointed out many, many times, their leaders, many of them are Jewish, without any really understanding of the Torah and what's inside of it. As mentioned before, this conflict can be seen today in the Middle East. As Gilder explains, the central issue in international politics, dividing the world into two fractious armies, is this one tiny state of Israel. The prime issue is not a global war of civilizations between the West and Islam, or a split between Arabs and Jews. These conflicts are real and salient, but they obscure the deeper moral and ideological war. The real issue is between the rule of law and the rule of leveler, he calls it leveler egalitarianism, between creative excellence and covetous fairness. So here's what happens. If you're an elite, you make everything fair. Not on your level, but for everybody else. That's the main thing. The same thing with Islam. Everybody is religious. Everybody is close to Allah. But what about the people living in the palace? Well, just like I say, it's 3% of the population, whereas everybody else. Between they're fair. Between admiration of achievement versus envy. And what happens is when you don't have, you start to begin envious, and resentment builds. What's the best thing to do there? Turn it to Israel. From medieval Christendom to Nazi Germany, from Soviet Russia until the modern Islamic Republic of Iran, and much of Palestinian society today, they fail the Israel test and share the same traits: brutal authoritarianism and obsessive anti-Semitism. This message of freedom, equality, and love threatens every totalitarian leader and ideology. It is why the bad guys always fight the Jews. Abraham's discovery of morality, social responsibility in the universe, threatened the greatest empire of his time. That was I'm trying to think back. Because what was the name of the empire over there? Was Media? I don't know. It's the Middle East. It's the Tigris Euphrates. It's the north. It's Syria. So what was it then? Anyway, social responsibility in the universe threatened the greatest empire of his time. Certainly, it threatened Egypt. In reaction to his success in spreading his wisdom, the Midrash records that the world's most powerful tyrant, who was Nimrod from Bavel, from Babylonia, tried to kill Abraham by having him thrown into a fiery furnace. It's why Hamas cannot accept a Jewish state beside them, and why the Palestinian Authority, like Hitler, cannot allow for Jews to live in their prospective future state. Throughout human history, Cain kills Abel, man kills man. Esau, that is Europe, hunts Jacob. Pharaoh plots the destruction of the Jews. This is the Egyptians, are today. And countless tyrants mimic this pattern across thousands of years. Now you talk about thousands of years. You want to know what went on 3,200 years ago, 2,800 years ago. The same thing. The struggles. The Ten Commandments, the Torah, and the Jewish mission were meant to break this cycle of blood and hate for all of humanity. Anti-Semites wage war on the Jews. Why? To protect the primitive values that the Jews disrupted. I'm living in Sao Paulo, Brazil. It takes 3 hours to get from the airport to my condominium on the beach. I don't go out from this little place here. It's so wonderful. I think that everything should be fair for everybody, should have everything, and I always vote left. Just like Hollywood, same thing. Hitler and the Nazis sought to cast off conscience and the divine truths of morality by committing horrifying crimes. They did this against the Jews, only for Germany to be haunted by those crimes for generations. Rosling quotes Hitler declaring, "Yes, we are barbarians. We want to be barbarians. It's an honorable title." He went for honor. Remember that. "We shall rejuvenate the world." Renowned psychologist Erik Erikson. Now, I think this is the Erik Erikson that he really wrote profoundly, but he was a longshoreman. In his famous book called Childhood and Society, maybe I got the wrong person, I could be, quoted Hitler as saying consciousness is a blemish like circumcision, and that both are Jewish blemishes. The primordial message of God to Cain: what there is no escape from immorality. The man on the other side. Abraham's discovery set him apart philosophically from all humanity. As the Midrash says, the whole world was on one side. That's called the word Aver. It goes with the word Ivri, which is the Jews. And Avram was on the other side. So Avraham was on a side. It was in the Aver Yarden. And so he became known as Havivri, the Hebrew, which means the man on the other side. He said something different than everybody else. This has been the essence of being Jewish ever since. His descendants have made a habit of challenging the status quo and has so often been seen as different, despised, ridiculed, and persecuted. As Rabbi Sachs says, Judaism is a living protest against the herd instinct. Remember what he said in the previous year about being in Iran? That the Iranis, the Shia, they want to be led. They want to be like cattle. They want to be like a herd. That's where their real joy is. They're not, it's a much more primitive country than we think, even though that they have rockets and they were trying to build a bomb, but it's an extremely, extremely poor country. So he says, ours is the dissenting voice in the conversation of humankind. The great poet Leonard Cohen, remember Lenny Cohen, famous for bearing his soul through song, spoke about facing anti-Semitism and the human reaction to being challenged. The world is hostile not only to the Jewish writer. The world is hostile to the writer. The world is hostile to the poet. The world is hostile to any man who will hold up a mirror to the particular kind of mindless chaos in which we endure. Now, this is so interesting to me. That is the glory of the poet, that is the glory of the writer, and that is the glory of the Jew. That he is despised, that he moves in the mirrored exile, covered in mirrors. And as he passes through the communities that he sojourns, he reflects their conditions, his conditions. We become a part of our society. To me, his destiny is exile, and his vocation is to be despised. Now, this isn't Lenny Cohen, the comedian. This is Leonard Cohen. The Jews may have been physically weak at times in their history, but their ability to disrupt and spread a vision of the world as it could be makes them perhaps the single most influential people in human history. Now, this happens, as I've said, and I said before about the St. Louis Jewish Light over there that's publicizing the president of the St. Louis Federation with his husband. They are also trying to project an idea of a world that's mistaken of how the world should be. Jewish philosophy and its history clearly implicate themselves as the perpetrators of the crime that Hitler and others blame them for. The crime of gifting and transforming the world with humanitarianism and ethical monotheism. As Rosenzweig, I think we'll pronounce it like that, said pithily, the Jew must pay for his blessing. Now, that's a very interesting idea. We are blessed, a blessed people, We have wonderful families with a tremendous Torah. We have institutions which reflect all the best things imaginable. But you have to pay for that. There is a medrash that teaches a parable that at Sinai God offered the Torah to all peoples of the world. Every nation responded by asking what the moral demands were, and upon hearing some unwanted restrictions, they politely refused. Only the Jews, usually famous for asking questions, unhesitatingly accepted to do what God asked of them when they declared, "We accept to do and we strive to understand." Regardless of the unknown lifestyle demands being made of them, and in full knowledge that accepting these divine gifts came with a high price of responsibility and suffering, Ivan Karamazov said it clearly. It's the fault of the rest of feeble mankind that they could not endure what they mightily endured. It is the fault of the weak soul that is unable to contain such terrible gifts. Now, we hear this a lot of times. We say that they're doing what they're doing because they're weak. That may be true. But murder is murder, and they have to learn. So he writes the why of Jew hatred. What's playing here? And so we return to our opening question. Why in every generation are so many people trying to wipe out the Jewish people? Here's what I think Jew hatred is and what's not. At times, Jew hatred can certainly be your run-of-the-mill ignorant racism. It exists right now in the United States. What's that lady's name? She's supporter of many right-wing ideas, which I like, but she also happens to be a Green is her name, Marjorie Green, representative. She happens to be a shtickle anti-Semite. There could be a legitimate gripe, and those people living in the South, a lot of space around, they have rights, they feel, to say the kinds of things that they do. We're going to only hear more from them. Maybe the Tucker Carlsons of the world also. It can be a legitimate gripe against Jews who deserve to be disliked, for example, when they act immorally, as the Jewish people have had their fair share of scoundrels. But right now we have Jeffrey Epstein, who knows who else. But taking the totality over Jewish history, in its genocidal passion, in every generation, including today's anti-Israel frenzy, Jew hatred is not like other forms of xenophobia. Jew hatred is not like because we are easy scapegoats. Now, that's what people are saying this now, and they've always said this. Because we're weak physically or it's easy to get at us. It's not because, he says, of the dislike of the unlike, like it's our peculiar noses, or because our blood is impure. It's not because we killed Jesus or drink Christian blood. We went through this. We've been through it all. It is not a mysterious virus, and it is not because we are white colonialists who stole Palestinian land. Jews are hated for every possible and often opposite external reasons, which tell us that these are not the real reasons. Most Jew haters do not have Hitler's clarity on what the real Jewish problem is. That's so interesting that he brought this up. And perhaps because so few lack a deep understanding of what is bothering them. In other words, people are emotional. We don't really know what's going on, but we have feelings. Those feelings could be channeled. I can't wait to see. They reach for the day's values to justify and moralize why they hate Jews. But make no mistake, next year they will hate us again, and this time for a different reason, because the stated reasons are just excuses, and they do not get to the root of what they hate about Jews. Why not build another Holocaust museum and educate them about the fact that they murder us? This is what Jew hatred is not. If you only learn what anti-Semitism is not from this book, I believe it would be a solid contribution because there is so much confusion on the matter. These misunderstandings do a disservice, not just to dealing with the hate, but also to the Jewish identity. That's why when you see, people on television say, "Oh, send him to the Holocaust Museum, take him out to Auschwitz." Why? To prove that we can be murdered? What did they get out of that? The basis of this, what he's saying, is in opposition to the imposition of morality in the world, curbing your libido. What is the reason that evil always seems to find and target the Jews? There are certainly levels. It's a reaction against Jewish strength as manifested in Jewish success and influence. It's a reaction against the Jewish predilection to push for change and improvement, the drive for more. It's created by the hostility of people and belief systems because we live in exile amongst the Gentiles. They have different religious trends, racial or ideological ideas that fear Jewish success. They don't want to see us get our ideas out there. Jewish disruption and competition. Now, one thing is definitely clear. The Jewish people have lost our Torah. That's why St. Louis is going on, and that's why it's possible for Reform to tell us that the next president of the Federation of the Greater St. Louis Jewish Community should have a husband. It is a rebellion against Jewish ideas and ideology. And a lot of it is because they just really don't know what Jewish ideas and ideology are. But I see that there is an army becoming educated in our world in many, many different ways and different forms. We hope that those ideas will also, we pray that those ideas will also gain acceptance and more penetration. To particularly point out the Chabad Lubavitch, which goes every place. It starts in people who have no direction, nowhere to go, can at least find a direction there. He says, especially the unwelcome imposition, one thing people really dislike, of monotheism, and its moral demands. At its deepest level, Jew hatred is the revolt against God and the people who represented him, against those who were commissioned to bear the ancient moral truths. It often comes from a deep feeling many have that Jews are somehow very different. As we will see in chapter 6, Jew hatred is the struggle to destroy the awesome spiritual potential of humanity by wiping out the Jews from the river to the sea. Again, Jew hatred is the struggle to destroy the awesome spiritual potential of humanity by wiping out the Jews. When the Messiah comes, the real Messiah, when the Messiah comes, you will see that all will join, because the Messiah bears the power of oneness. It's said we're very separated, and I see and I point out how we need to come more and more together. This war, the war of the world against Israel, has brought a lot of people together. I think that Hitler articulated the uncomfortable, disrupted power of the Jewish people. It's a phenomenon that many people feel but cannot articulate. Hitler understood the Jews. He understood the Jews with icy clarity. But there was one thing he could not fathom. I'm not sure what he meant to say there, but he has no real idea that there is a God in the midst. I am Ani Hashem Bekerev Haaretz. I'm Hashem. I'm in the midst of all reality. Well, this is Baruch Fleischman. This is the Tikkun Elevator Call Out.